So hello, here we are for
Hey,
Meet the Jugglers live. Hello, Ben.
hello, Anthony.
So I'm very
Nice
happy.
to be here.
I'm very happy to have you as a guest on this series of interviews, conversations around creativity and expression, essentially with juggling.
Mm,
Last week, just to say a little bit of context for the viewers. Second, so last week, had a conversation with Tayton about flow, getting into the flow state. Next week
mhm,
we'll have Luther, and we'll be talking about juggling and let's say art, sort of in sort of more of a contemporary take to it. And then we have Tostamista, who is a great theatrical, great character. He works a lot with characters and juggling. And then we have
mm.
Tim Airwalker at the end, which I particularly like his take on dismantling tricks and building things up and how he's transparent about sharing it. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, and obviously my work is a lot around play, so I'm
mhm.
always very interested in hearing that component of it because juggling offers us enormous um, possibility to play and like really have fun. It's like it's incredible. Actually, it's very engaging for the brain. Um, but we
Yeah.
have this society around us which wants to suck out the joy of everything, basically. So sometimes we can lose our way as a juggler,
Mm,
um, and think we need to fit into a box where we blatantly don't have to fit into at all. Let's
mm.
talk about this to
Sure.
start with about fitting into boxes. Um,
Fitting into boxes. Well, that's something that's really that I definitely touch on a lot in my teaching work. So I mean, I, I've been teaching almost since I started juggling in like 1989. I started teaching parallel as well because I found it was such a useful way to understand what I was doing.
mhm.
Um, and now I've been teaching in Stockholm for a very long time, and now I teach at ISAC in Brussels and independent workshops and blah blah blah. And I accompany a lot of other people's projects as outside eye or choreographer or whatever. But it's a subject, this thing of fitting into a box. Um, make your own box, I guess, is the answer. Make a box that you're comfortable inside. And so I try to really encourage people to get as conscious as possible about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Everybody goes through certain phases of feeling really inspired and really motivated, and phases where they don't feel so inspired and not so motivated. And then maybe you get to the studio or your practice space, whatever it is, and you think, well, I don't really feel like juggling today, but I guess I should. And you get into a state of sort of pushing yourself through something and
Mm.
getting maybe strict with yourself or whatever, right? And then it's so useful to be able to formulate to yourself, why am I doing this actually? What is it that really interests me about this thing? Rather than some days it's great to tick off your list of tricks that you want to practice or make that choreography or, I don't know, express something. Um, and other days it's really useful to um, deconstruct everything and go back to absolute basics and find out what is it that I like about just throwing an object, for
Yeah.
example, right? Why do I like that? What what is it that interests me about the tiny little details inside things? That's that makes me very curious, and I see a lot in people when they begin to understand their own like juggling process, I guess you can call it. Um, things become a lot less, in a way, a lot more personal and a lot less personal at the same time because they're able to externalize their own process.
Yes, I understand what you were coming to. Yeah, you're much more.
Mm.
Yeah, I went to. I did this school in Switzerland, the Dimitri School. They don't do
Ah,
much
right.
juggling there, but it's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
know it.
physical
Yeah,
theatre. And I want to touch on
yeah,
this whole physical theatre thing in a little while, anyway. But
yeah.
yeah, they really wanted to teach us the craftsmanship of
Hmm.
physical theatre, which is the craftsmanship of performing. Essentially, it's
Yeah,
it's we have this paradox that we are our own instrument, and this sort of like causes all sorts of funny happenings, right?
Mm,
And insecurities, but it's finding this character, finding this persona, finding this style somehow that can help us
mm,
um, carry forward. And we're never really like ourselves with all of our um, let's say our worries and our concerns on stage. You know,
mm,
we're very
mm,
we choose a little bit of, and the more we're able to choose what we're bringing onto stage, the less nervous we're going to be on stage as well. The more we're going to be
mm,
wanting to share what our creation. You know,
mm, mm,
um, and this ties a little bit with what we were saying about out of the box. Is this what I see is very important? Is this really understanding our artistic identity, and that will help
mm,
us with our training. It will help us with our concept, with our bigger picture, and it will help us also essentially communicate, market, and be able to sell what we're doing. Right, if we have a clear identity. So
sure,
so
sure.
yeah, what does that? How does that resonate with you? What do you think? What does
Well,
that bring for you?
I mean, the word consciousness springs to mind really again and again and again in everything that you're doing when you're talking about the details of what people are doing on stage. Um, it's interesting because you mentioned before we started that you'd seen me in BJC 2K. Of
Yes.
course, that's a long
Yeah, yeah.
time ago
Let me
now.
say this a second. Let me say this because it's so important. So
Mm,
yeah, I first saw you, Ben, in on on the BJC 2000, where Anthony Gatto was training in the gym every day, and he was at the very end. So it was a very charged event,
mm,
and you did two different acts, I think, one with balls and with
mm,
clubs. I can still remember it now,
mm,
and it really touched me with this character with this great big hair sticking up in the air, but all very clean,
mm.
very creative, very beautiful, and yes, these images they stayed with me for a long time, and so yeah, let's talk about you rather than like being more theoretical. How did you get to this? Like, what was going on with you? What were you studying? What did you want to?
Well, it's been a long journey. I mean, since then things have gone in very different directions. But the leading up to that moment was very much well. So I started juggling in 1989, and I was able to do it basically straight away. Like within 10 minutes, I could do like 30 catches of three, and was super hooked, like many people are. Pre-internet, no idea what was going on. So I just went home and juggled three and bounced things off my body and da da da. And then a friend gave me, had heard that I had learned to juggle, and he came along, gave me a big bag full of clubs and balls and rings and Diablo and everything. I was like, here, play with this. And I was like, wow, okay. And then the bottom of this bag was a flyer for the only full-time circus education in England at the time that was called Full Time. It was
Hmm,
the forerunner of what is now called Socomedia. And so I held this flyer in my hands and I started shaking because I just thought, well, that's what I've got to do. That was my final year at school. I was 18. So I went there. We also did a lot of physical theatre at this school, a lot of Lecoq, a lot of movement work, a lot of somatic work. And I had a lovely juggling teacher called Haggis MacLeod.
hmm,
Um, and yes, what I learned during that time stayed with me for a long time. I was lucky that I was already a little bit connected to Sean and Catty in London, Sean Gandini and Catty Olaokla. And before I went to full time, I'd lived in London for a few months, connected with them. And then they asked me to be a part of their first full length show, which was called Neither, Either, Both, and, which they did a reworking of, I think it was early this year or late last year. Um, so we did that, went to Edinburgh, and that was it was a very different kind of work to what we'd been doing at full time. So it was very sort of neutral presence and like Merce Cunningham and Bauhaus and the expression comes through the actions and not through the sort of character.
Mm.
And then I left that, and after a year working with them, and I worked with a group called Stretch People in England, which was much more towards what I would call kind of contemporary clown.
Mm.
Um, and then I moved to Berlin in '95, was very much in the dance world because I didn't really enjoy the circus scene in Germany so much. It was super commercial at that time.
Mm.
Ended up in the dance world and was in a few smaller dance companies, always working with objects, but always with an interest in a kind of a playful presence.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of always had these 3 points of the juggler, the dancer, and the clown. They were always like those were my three that were always somehow interacting with each other, whether that was on a stage throwing clubs and balls, or whether that was in a studio with dancers or in a research project. There was always sort of different incarnations of that trio in me. And I guess what you saw in York, I think it was in
Yeah, yeah.
2000, those were the two kind of juggling incarnations of that side of me, of that kind of conversation. That was quite extroverted, without shouting, but it was still sort of subtle because that's just who I
Yes.
am. I was interested in street performing at the time, but in a way of street performing that had nothing to do with standing there and shouting, but in a way that was intended to just make people curious. I love to work with curiosity and
Mm.
to rather than shouting, yeah, it's showtime and come on, blah, blah, blah. Nothing against that. That's totally works as well. But I was very interested in creating very sort of gentle personal connections with everyday people, through my art, through my juggling, through my movement, through my presence. And basically, that's carried on to this day. Now I don't call myself Ben Smalls anymore because as I was back then. Um, he went to in retirement in about 2018 after many years of doing different performances, and I sent him to go and sit on the beach. And because I was very interested in working extremely naturalistically and basically almost not performing, but just being present, doing stuff, and being encountering people. So I made this performance called Tactile, which was between juggling and sculpture.
Mm.
And I made it 4 hours long because I wanted space and
4 hours long.
Mm. Yeah, it's like an exhibition project, basically. Like people can
Okay.
come and go
Okay.
because I wanted that kind of natural rhythm, sort of everyday rhythm, but with unusual things happening. And I wanted to have really contact and connection with people that was as genuine as possible and that wasn't designed in like a stage persona way.
Mm.
Of course, I used techniques of rhythm and timing and focus and in the background, but I just wanted to have reality, sort of as close as possible, whatever that word means, but as close as possible to what I felt was kind of genuine and authentic. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing. That the clown is always a little bit in the background. Mm, yeah,
Yeah.
does that kind of
So
answer your
lots
question?
of
That's
people.
a little bit of
Sorry.
background.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, that's a 4 hour performance. Oh, that's amazing. I've always wondered what it's like to work in art galleries and things like this. I think it's like a great
Mm,
space to perform
yeah,
in. Um,
yeah.
yeah, you could do a lot because they're like very big spaces often, and bare as well. It's like there's like, I suppose in a way like a church has this
Mm,
concentration, this focus in them,
mm,
and
mm.
people can somebody actually moving doing something it's it's something different in the museum when it's all like pretty static generally, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, what I wanted to one part of it was really about also giving um, or highlighting the value of juggling as a visual art form. I think
Mm,
juggling has many aspects And many people have been discussing about what is it sort of for so many years, and it just has many aspects, and that's all perspective. From the perspective of a visual art form, you can think of like a Kandinsky picture that so much illustrates what a lot of juggling is. Like Sean Gandini talks about these ephemeral architectures that he says, and I wanted to highlight that that was like my juggling intention with this piece.
Mm,
Um, the clown intention was the connection, and the dancer intention was very much letting the objects move me in different ways.
mm. So what I'm interested is I went I personally I think I did a lot of different activities and different
Yeah.
courses and things that probably a juggler doesn't need to do, right? Like
Mm,
3 years in a Dimitri school when I came out, I was
mm,
ready to do more like circus theatre things. It was
mm,
just like I was just on a different level, and I don't
mm,
know if it was like necessarily a good thing in the end. It was like almost too much. But like as a teacher, I've got so
mm,
many things like tucked up my sleeves
mm.
that could I can
Yeah.
just pop out when I need to, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
um so what in how let's say go very quickly, like almost
Mm,
as sort of like an advice level, you know, it's like what
mm,
do you think were the things that were most useful really for you in your studies, you know? It's let me say this and I'll give you a bit more
mm, mm,
what I mean by this.
mm,
Lots of jugglers, you know, they're a bit stiff maybe and their stage presence is like not really there. uh,
mm,
um, People suggest to do clown, right? And then they go and do a
mm,
clown, and then they realize that they really like it, and then they drop the juggling altogether, maybe, right?
mm,
Or they, um, yeah, it's sort of like it's a bit sidetracking, or perhaps they do some acting, and then they realize that they're not really a very good actor, and and
mm,
but really, a juggler just needs tiny. This is how I feel. Just doesn't need to be a brilliant actor, but needs to know the principles. And the
yeah.
same with the dancer. You
Mm,
know, I did a lot of
mm,
jazz, and like
mm,
for me, it wasn't the right. I had a good time doing it, but it was really hard for me to
mm,
work out which
mm.
foot goes in front of anywhere. You know, I did it for
Jazz
years.
is so stylized. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I did a lot of contact improvisation, and that was really good for
Yeah.
me to do
Yeah.
contact.
Yeah.
And generally,
Mm,
I would say to jugglers, it's the best for me. I don't know. I want to hear what you have to say, right? But for me, it's the
mm,
one best way to really get a huge movement of vocabulary very quickly. If it's
mm,
guided
mm.
well, um, um, yeah, because then it could be a technique as well, right? But if it's done
Mm,
really
mm,
as an exploration, then it's perfect
mm,
juggling. That's what my thoughts.
mm.
Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, as a fundamental kind of overall principle, I think it's useful to find out where is the tension in your body and mind that is not useful for you. And what is useful for you is defined by you, for sure. And that has to do with your level of self-awareness and consciousness at any given moment in time. Um, So I worked a lot with various different somatic techniques, with Feldenkrais, with Alexander, with body mind centering, um, and I incorporated those things into my personal practice and into my teaching practice. So in my experience working with different teachers, anybody who really goes into detail and lets me understand the details, like the tiny details inside what I'm doing, the principles behind what I'm doing, those have always been really useful teachers for me,
Mm,
where I get a sense of something expanding in me, um, that is not just somebody telling me how it works, but giving me an understanding of how to find out more for myself, like opening a door and saying, hey, if you um, like from Alexander technique, for example, if I release the tension in my neck, and think about that while I'm doing something, then it means my shoulders are more relaxed and blah, 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 and I'm more, in general, open to the world, more open to communicate, which is useful for the stage.
Yeah.
So, and going from there, I can then apply what I've learned from the tension in my neck, which is often a starting point in Alexander, and I apply it to the rest of my body. I can start to apply it to how I'm thinking about life and all that kind of stuff. So those kind of things have been extremely, extremely useful. To your point about like the difference between a really stylized dance form like jazz that works very much with clear forms and choreographies, and this is jazz and this is not jazz, and the difference between that and like contact improv, or what I started with, which was new dance, new dance and contemporary dance based on I don't want to get too nerdy about it, but people can
Yeah,
Google, I
no,
guess.
please. You can have like a
Based,
minute or two of nerdiness.
yeah. So based on like the researches of like Judson Dance Theatre, which was in the 60s in New York, and it was like a bunch of people that were that's where contact improv came from, and the crossovers of somatic exploration and the dance world, and it was always about, until then the dance was a lot about how do I make this body move in the way that I want it to move, sort of how do I dominate my own body in a way.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was the transition into, well, how do I listen to this body, what it wants to do, how does it want to move? And in a way, there's a big parallel there into what has happened in contemporary juggling in the last, well, 35 years, because it was just starting, I feel, when I started. Um, it used to be very much, how do I make this object do what I want it to do?
Mm.
And it has become very much for many people, how do I listen to this object? What does it want to do? And how do I tell it to tell me what to do? Like there's a more of a dialogue going on
Yeah, yeah,
often.
yeah, yeah. Totally a
Yeah,
connection, more of
yeah,
a connection to
yeah,
it as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
mm, yeah. I don't know if I'm answering your question or if I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
rambling
yeah,
on.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's fascinating. So,
Mm,
um, so yeah, I think people like let's say I don't know how to go about this really, but because you've expressed it anyway, right? The value of like
mm,
somatics,
mm,
Alexandra technique, all different
mm,
body techniques, which will also be yoga and tai chi,
mm.
and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a point. What with, with a juggler, I wouldn't. This is what I would say, and I want to hear what you have to say as well, right? If somebody is
Yeah.
oh, what should I do? It's always like I would always suggest follow like what you're excited about right now, you know. And
Mm,
then
mm,
when it
mm,
starts to
mm,
dwindle a little bit, or perhaps
mm,
before it starts dwindling a little bit,
mm,
then really start to ask the questions that you've been suggesting and come back to your body, because the more we're in our body, the more present we are, the more our interest is activated, the more things
mm.
become interested, right? Because our interest is
Yeah,
activated. So
yeah, yeah,
we can access more of this intrinsic joy that juggling has to it. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, what I'm saying it probably is like, yeah, how do you see this the progression of things? And I think there was a time where lots of jugglers they sort of like boo-hooed a little bit like this bodywork stuff, you know. It's a bit like all that's all a bit airy
sure.
fairy, but you know, I want to do like
Mm, mm,
this right.
mm, mm,
Mm,
mm. Sure, and I think that's fair enough too. Like it's not everybody's journey. Some people, for some people, it's better to either just juggle or go to the gym or go for a run or whatever. If that's how they connect, if that reflects their personal connection to their own body, and if that's their entry point, then great, go for it. I can just say from my experience that yes, that's been hugely helpful. Um, you said something a moment ago. Now I've forgotten. What was it? Um,
Um, yeah, it was about like when is the right point. If somebody, let's put it like not who's not interested, because like who's not
mm,
interested,
mm.
they're probably not listening to this conversation anyway, right? But like, let's say if somebody's
Yeah,
really interested, it's like, okay,
yeah,
yeah, I know, I've realized like I'm a bit of a stiff juggler. I want to get a bit more
yeah.
creative.
You're right, right. It was about following. Thank you. Yeah, it was about following the what excites you.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's 100% wonderful advice, not just for juggling but for life. Of course, you always have to find a balance, but it's really what gives you energy, what energizes you in any given moment. And then me, I'm also quite obsessed with making structures and making systems for
Mm,
things because I think creativity flourishes within systems when you give things a clear framework to play inside. Like every game has kind of rules, even though they might be not spoken, right? So again, getting conscious of the rules of the game that you're currently playing in the thing that excites you so that
yeah.
you are able
Yeah.
to make more out of that. Like I have a class that I was teaching a couple of weeks ago in Brussels, which is really based on just that. I give the students like 10 minutes time to find out what excites them today, what gives them energy, what interests them, where's the big interest today, and then to just make a sequence based on that thing that is only 10 seconds long. And that sequence, it's like really just an essence of that, whether it's a movement thing, whether it's standing there throwing one ball, whatever they want. You can take a different object, play with the bottle, whatever, just 10 seconds and be as precise as they can about it within that sequence about what gives them energy. And then they take that sequence as like a starting point, like a choreographic motif, and they can expand on it and they can reverse it and make a contrast to it and generate more and more and more material out of that original little starting point that excites them. And I find this, I do this quite a lot in the studio as a creative method. It's like basically, I hardly ever go to the studio today to these days to just just juggle. I'm always making something.
Mm,
Because that's, I guess, back to the very beginning question and what you spoke about. For me, I'm interested in making stuff and in giving things into a form. Often it's a choreographic form, which
mm.
just means arranging things in time and space, right? It's and
Yes,
then
yes.
the pleasure I have, whatever it is that I feel when I'm doing that, becomes the human expression or the human
So you're
emotion.
talking about like a temporal creation, or are you talking about something that you could also repeat in the future?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a system that
okay.
oh, basically I'm constantly generating material that I sometimes I know exactly what it's for, which project that is for, and
Okay.
sometimes I just do it as an exercise in creativity to generate, and some things that will come back later. I will record them, write them down, and some things will be just like, okay, that was just for today, fine, I can leave it, got it out of my system. But
Yeah.
basically, I would encourage every juggler at whatever stage they're at, if they're interested in performing, if they're interested in like having a pathway of their where they share their own work, to just practice creating. It's something that you practice. It's not a thing that you. Of course, some days you feel more inspired than other days, and that's related to what we were speaking about before. The days where you don't feel inspired, they're just days where perhaps you didn't manage to find the thing that interests you. It's not that nothing's there.
Yeah, yeah. We need to debunk a little bit this idea of
Mm.
creativity, what it means. If you're
Yeah,
creative, oh, I'm not creative, or
yeah,
we're
bullshit.
all creative,
Mm.
right? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's a painful process, I find it a very painful process creating. I think
Hell
it's a little
yeah,
bit about how our brains work, right? Because it's before
yeah.
it becomes part of our like lizard brain, let's say, it's heavily
Mm,
thought out, So
mm,
I
mm.
think like what you said at the beginning, to find your excitement, that probably helps us to not make mechanical creations, right? Because the danger is when
Yeah.
we're creating is they become very mechanical,
Yeah.
and I don't know, they're very long, even like just to do 5 minutes on stage that's like so choreographed and created is like
Mm.
such an intense work. And I don't
Mm.
think it's even brings like necessarily the best result. So how
Mm.
do you balance this um like fixing everything that you're going to do and having space where you don't actually know what you're going to do?
Right. This is very much what I do in Tactile. This long performance that I have, it's not always 4 hours. It's between like 1 hour and 4 hours, depending on
Yeah.
the context. Um, how do I say this relatively briefly? Um, I have a method that I developed that I call the language of objects, or TLO, and it's basically about um, generating awareness of what we can call the affordances of objects. So, what opportunities do the objects afford us as humans? Um, what I go through all of the different senses, and how does this particular sense interact with this object? What information do I receive from it, and how do I use that information as a juggler, as a mover, as a performer? So what I've done for myself there is I like in Tactile, I make myself a big playground for my own senses. I work with a lot of different objects, and I have super clear principles that I work with. Um, so the principles are fixed, and I have freedom to play inside with those principles. Um, it's hard to be brief with this. We have to do like a 3-day workshop.
Okay, let's
But basically, you get to a point where you feel very safe
yeah.
within improvisation, because there's all this information that you can play with all of the time, but you don't get stiff because you're free to reinterpret. But
Okay.
to what you were talking about of like making a fixed thing within like 5 minutes and it's always the same. Um, for me, then that it
Which is like a
is
normal act, right? A normal act would
right.
be that.
Yeah, yeah, right, sure. And
But still, it's a bit. It's like I still feel that. What I guess it's I practice yoga and tai chi. Tai chi, you have a sequence, but before it gets fluid, you have to really know what's going on, and then
mm,
I
mm,
think what
mm,
probably happens at some point is that perhaps a creation is it hasn't gone deep enough into our cells, and we're still
mm,
worried about it. And perhaps
mm,
there's some memory issues as well, and perhaps
mm,
not taking it far enough. Um,
mm, mm.
but still, it's always risking being a little bit stiff, though. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's useful to give the analytical side of the brain something to do. So
Yes.
if you've got to a point where you have your 5 minute sequence or your 5 minute act, if you want to call it, um, and you feel like, okay, now I've really got it down. I'm not worrying about dropping so much anymore, and memory is really not a problem. It has a logical flow that I understand. It has a structure that I understand, and I'm just going to go through it. Then you can get to the stage of perhaps feeling a little bit bored or tired, and when you're bored or tired of something, the brain, anyone can tell you that who's done like a long run of variety where you do 150 performances over 2 months or something. Great, I've done that a few times. And you get to then, uh, you can get into that state of sort of tired boredom with it, where it can start to feel mechanical again. And then it's useful to go talking about all of that sensitivity work in the body and in the mind, to give yourself little tasks to say, okay, hey, today my act is going to be about rhythm. Today, my act is going to be about focus. Today, my act is going to be about timing. Or today, I'm going to catch not at that moment, I'm going to catch not on the one, but on the end of the one or on the two in the music, just to see how it feels. So giving yourself these little challenges to constantly keep yourself awake, to
Yes, yeah, that
provoke
sounds like a
yourself
very interesting
into
game
presence.
to play with
Mm,
yourself. Yeah, activating
yeah, yeah,
play into it as well.
yeah.
Um,
Also, when you have your act, to um, find out as much as possible about it by, I don't know, express your act in a different way, draw your act, sing your act, do your act without the objects, do your act the whole time lying on the floor, or I don't know, get up at 3 in the morning, do your act, or these are all really, really useful things to connect, to sort of get it deeper into your body and more conscious.
yes, yes, and then when it's at that level, then there is the expression can happen,
Yeah,
and the audience will
yeah.
feel part of
Mm,
it, and
mm,
you will draw them in, essentially draw them
mm,
in.
mm, mm. I think
So
really what's touching about juggling and circus in general is the authenticity, because it's reality, right? We're doing real things in real time. We're like, I'm not pretending to do this. I'm doing it, and it's carrying meaning directly towards whoever's watching it. So I don't have to imagine, like theatrically imagine that I am, you know, I'm a guy in the market stall throwing the apple and asking if you want to buy it. You know, a classical sort of circus theatre scenario.
oh yes, yes,
But
yes.
I'm actually doing this, and it means something. And the reason it's hard to talk about what it means is because it's juggling.
Which is
It's
hard to
not
look at it.
theatre, it's not literature, it's not, but juggling speaks to the, I'm a big believer in juggling speaks to the world in a very unique and particular way, in a way that no other art form can. And is greatly misunderstood, and is greatly, in a way, the meaning inside juggling is kind of traumatized by a lot of other things being layered on top of it as a kind of a justification for performing it. Um, yeah, that's my
What do you think is
personal.
the base of it? I mean, there is some, there
Mm,
is, or how do you think it's important? There is an audience admires, but they
mm,
also think that that person could do that stuff anyway. You know, so it's not.
mm,
So this is
mm,
also a little bit of a like a, what's the word for it? Tricky situation to get out of, right? To have the audience
mm,
live that with you and not just be, I can
mm,
do this, obviously, right?
mm,
I
mm.
think that's the heart connection with the audience, though.
Yeah, I think it's um, the kind of connection you create is very much reliant on the context and the um, like, just like a word can change its meaning in a different sentence, right? The other words around it will make it mean something else. It's the same for juggling, same for a particular throw, a particular trick, rolling the ball or whatever. It will communicate something different, um, depending on what came before and after it, and in the whole context of what it is. And it will be more noticeable or less noticeable according to sort of the punctuation you use. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Mm.
So, if anybody that's watching this now,
Mm.
you have any questions or something's brought up with you or something you don't agree with, even, please pop it in the
Yeah.
comments, and we can take this conversation further, right?
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
know.
Let's go. Let's discuss.
Ben and I are
Mm.
only people that have thought about these things a lot. But
Mm.
I don't know. I still consider that I've got a lot to learn. Right.
Oh, absolutely. I never want to stop learning. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Very much.
um, what are you what the projects that you're doing now? Are they open for other people to
Mm.
join? Are they
Hmm.
all like big parts of school projects, or how if anybody wants to work with you now, Ben? How do they do
Yeah,
it?
they write me an email and tell me what they want, and then we can talk about it. I'm so I'm planning to teach some language of objects workshops in the over the next year. Like the main teaching work I do is at Isaac in Brussels and a little bit in Stockholm still. But as I'm based in Cologne and still connected to Berlin, there will probably be some things happening in these two places. Um, I'm I've supported I don't know how many projects now, maybe 50 projects over the last years of as an outside eye. So supporting people's creative processes towards making a show or an act or whatever. Outside eye is like my version of outside eye is like a mixture of choreographic and like play advice and
Yeah.
supporting
Why do
people
you
to
not call
go.
it like directing? Is it just because they have a
Hmm.
lot more responsibility in their creation?
In my experience recently, people don't want to be directed. The last project I directed called Symbiosis Circus. Now I said directed. I didn't direct it. The last project I accompanied was Symbiosis Circus, and they two performers, and they very clearly said at the beginning they don't want a director. They want to be supported in their creative process.
Hmm.
So we worked like that with me asking them a lot of questions, occasionally for sure giving creative input. But in the end, it's always like their decision. For me, like the director is kind of in a classical sense, like a decision maker. And the
Okay.
outside eye is like a questioner and maybe some input. And me as a choreographer, that's how I like to work anyway. Um, yeah, I have this Tactile project. I have a new solo that I'm working on where I'm working with a lot of paper and group projects is called Halt mal kurz, which means "Can you hold this, please?" in German.
And who's that
And
with?
that's with a pool of different performers. Everybody has different projects going on. Annie Cooper is part of the team. Shacha Itzaki is Israeli French juggler. Sarah Behrendt, she's a student in Tilburg at Akapa, the school there. Niels Seidel, he was in Spot the Drop before. Yeah, and a bunch of people.
Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah,
Is
that's
there
that's
anything else you'd
about
like
me.
to add that we have not really talked about that you're like, gee, I want to say this thing?
Wow, God, there's so much.
Oh, right, okay.
Um,
Let's
I
do
will
a
never
full
stop. Let me
competition.
do a quick little plug for this, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
please,
Voices
please.
magazine. This
Yeah.
is the Voices magazine of the every year the Circus Dance Festival in Cologne publishes a magazine. And
Ah.
me and my partner Jenny Pachowski, we edited this magazine this year. It's called Reclowning, the political in clown. Um, where we did a lot of very nice interviews and articles together with various people who are interested in clown and whatever that means today. I've done a research project the last years about contemporaneity in clown, so clown without nostalgia. What are the
Mm.
principles really underneath clown without having to kind of sort of be like this?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And is that in
Um,
German or is it in English as well?
that's in both. That's
Okay,
bilingual.
okay.
It's called
And people
Voices.
can find a copy, can they? We'll pop a link in the
Yeah, people
comments.
can people
Um,
can find it on the Circus Dance Festival website. But if they just Google Voices Magazine, Clown, Circus, whatever,
yeah,
they will find it. And the
okay.
festival's in Cologne at the end of May, I believe, or the beginning of June. I'm not sure this year. There we are.
So stuff. Um, I'm just going to share this with the audience as well.
Yeah.
Um, with the lockdown, I made huge changes. I made huge
Yeah.
changes. I was yeah, I was working as a juggler. I was teaching in circus school in Rome, um,
Mm.
and I was teaching kids yoga as well. I really like to work with little kids. It's fun.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
that
love
all
that.
changed. And so the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working a lot on understanding how to communicate what we do, how
Mm.
to like you, you would call it marketing, right? Marketing has such a
Mm.
bad name for it, but working with people that have like a strong ethical side to it, um,
Mm.
and so I went on a massive deep dive on all this because before I saw like who are the people I like to work with, either jugglers or non-jugglers, right? And it's just
Mm, mm,
much more subtle than all that. It's much more
mm,
subtle.
mm.
Non-jugglers is not a
Absolutely.
bracket of people, right? Nobody identifies with being a non-juggler, like nobody. Um,
And
and
everybody has a connection to objects.
and yeah, and there's this thing with marketing, it's like communicating what you do, but also like what you're bringing to a situation. Who are the people that
Mm,
actually hire you? If you have a website as a juggler, um,
mm,
who are the people that you're wanting to um, that you want to sell your service to us essentially, and what are they looking for? Are they
yeah,
looking for a great
yeah,
act, or are they looking for somebody
yeah.
who's reliable? Are they looking for somebody that has a special niche? And because otherwise, our marketing is just how good we are, and
Mm,
and some people resonate also with our point of view a lot. So lots of people that hire acts, they were artists before as well anyway, right? So
sure,
they want to
sure.
resonate with your vision,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
they don't just want somebody who doesn't really care about what they're doing and they just do it for the money, right? I don't
yeah.
know, it's a complicated thing, but
Mm.
um
But that's another reason to get super conscious about what you're doing and how you make your art form, because then you can talk about it more easily, right, to
exactly,
other people. You can
exactly,
sell it
it's
better.
what you said at
Mm.
the beginning, like very very, what's the word, essential and beautiful. And
Mm.
I haven't gone back into performing juggling. I think I might do one
Yeah,
day. I don't know.
yeah.
I've
It's a bit
shifted a lot
exciting.
into play as an expression, as a way of connecting with people. And
Mm.
but I still hold a residential retreat in Italy every year at the end of September, and
Oh,
that's really
nice.
in the middle of nowhere. So
Yeah.
really, you really get this um, get all of like urbanness out of us totally, and
Hmm.
really come into our bodies and
Wonderful.
it's funny, Ben, because one of the funny it even sounds ridiculous saying it, right? But it's even this shared cooking part of it becomes
Mm.
enhances our juggling. Like
For
cooking for
sure.
other people
Yeah, for
is
sure.
really strange how this all works.
Mm.
And
Mm. Mm.
I think it's a lot about bringing more ease into our bodies and feeling more ease, and then the best part of our creativity comes out when we feel at ease.
Mm.
I think
That's it,
probably
for sure.
that's what really
Yeah.
happens.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Mm.
anyway, this book that I wrote 10 years ago is 10 this
Yeah.
year.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I'm very excited about it, and yeah. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this conversation, everybody that's watching this, then please show your enthusiasm in the comments. And Ben, thank you.
Thank you so much. Been a pleasure.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Great.